Yeah. Ah, I would have forgot. Thank you. We focus too much on how King George was trying to push us around. We don't focus enough on how the colonists were pushing themselves around. But don't take my word for it. John Adams in 1785 would write this to a friend. The history of our revolution will be one continued lie from one end to the other. The essence of the whole will be that Dr. Franklin's electric rod smote the earth and out sprang George Washington. Now, what Adams was particularly upset about was that his own role in the coming of the American Revolution was going to be forgotten, and he was largely right. Adams was a largely forgotten founding father until wonderful HBO John Adams series. You should definitely check it out. It's really good. But I think Adams is right on another regards, in that down the road, Americans were going to tell a story of the American Revolution from the standpoint of the so-called great man. That we were going to focus on the Ben Franklins and the George Washingtons, and we were going to miss the revolution within the revolution. What's that a picture of? A painting of? Yeah, Washington crossing the Delaware. And I think you probably know which one is Washington, all right? Do you think he was standing up when he crossed the Delaware? Why not? It's midnight. He's the commander of the army in a rowboat over the water. Yeah, he's not standing up. So why is he painted as standing up? What's that? He's representative. Yeah. Who is the most important person? Who are the most important people in this revolution? Right. That's what the painter is trying to get at. We've done this. We've talked about him. We know what he wants out of the revolution, right? He wants the freedom, along with his buddies, to build a mighty Republican empire here in North America. Our lecture today and into next week is concerned with these guys. What do they want? Why did the people who are literally driving the revolution, what do they want from independence? Do they want, are we just supposed to assume that George Washington wanted this and everybody else just kind of fell in line behind them? Or that they had their own interests? They had their own reasons for independence. They had their own perspectives. We were talking about what one historian, one of my favorite historians, Gary Nash, has called the other American Revolution. Pretty much all the stories I'm going to be telling today and into next week come out of his book, The Other American Revolution, that we need to understand. To be able to understand the other American Revolution, we need to understand that there were economic classes, just like there are always classes throughout history, right? There are no kind of, maybe in certain Native American communities and African communities, but even there, right, there's always hierarchy. There's always division. There's always, yes, classes. And because there are classes, there are class conflicts. And so to understand history of any particular period, we need to understand the nature of class conflict. Class conflict takes different forms in different periods. We need to understand the inequalities of power, the inequalities of property in a particular time, and see what shape they take. It's not always a kind of UAW workers striking against the owners of GM or Ford, right? That's how we think of class conflict. It doesn't always take that form. In fact, through a lot of history, and in fact, even in our society today, class conflict actually takes the form of town versus country or city versus country, farmers versus city folk or small town folk, right? The major right, there's a few major dividing lines in American politics today. One that's emerging right now: do you think America was founded as a Christian nation or not? Or whether America should be a Christian nation or not? That is becoming a huge dividing line in our politics. It's a new one coming on just in the past 10 years or so. Education is quickly becoming the major dividing line, whether you're a Democrat or Republican. Did you go to four-year college? That is huge. But still, the main dividing line of Americans today is: are you rural or are you urban? American politics, American culture, our fault line breaks down along those lines. And it's been that way for a long, long time. So let's talk about a form of class conflict that kind of fell along these lines, familiar to us. Sorry, I need to refresh myself on some dates. In 1745, Samuel Baldwin was arrested. Samuel Baldwin's a farmer in New Jersey. He's arrested in 1745. He was chopping down trees on a property owned by Governor Lewis Morris. So Baldwin is put in jail. 150 fellow farmers of Baldwin's friends, they go and they break Baldwin out of jail. Sheriff goes and arrests three of the guys who helped lead this jailbreak. 3 weeks later, 300 farmers come beat up sheriff and his buddies and break their friends out of jail. What is going on in New Jersey in 1745? It's something that's going on in a lot of the Western territories. The further you go, with all the colonies, right? There's 13 colonies. The further you go west, the more rural, the more isolated they are. This is where Samuel Baldwin and his farmers are out there. And what's going on in New Jersey in the 1740s is pretty similar conflicts are breaking out in other colonies at this time. And it has everything to do with a kind of class conflict. Who is Governor Morris? Governor Morris is actually new to the colonies. He had come into New Jersey, a friend of the king, and as a friend of the king, he had been given a tract of land. When guys like Morris are coming in to places like New Jersey, they're given these land grants. It's not exactly clear what's the western boundary. Like, all right, we all right, Governor Morris, like, all right, here's your property line north, here's your property line east, here's your property line south. What about west? How far west does Morris get to claim land? It's not really specified because it's not entirely clear, like where does New Jersey end? So Morris, as you might expect, claimed a pretty significant western boundary. And it happened to be one that Samuel Baldwin lived on, and Samuel Baldwin was chopping down trees on. So this is Morris's perspective. I got this farmer, he's on my land. I had this piece of paper that says it's my land. Baldwin and his buddies shouldn't be there. Now, who is Samuel Baldwin? He's a guy whose family has been chopping down trees there for generations. He's been there for some time. The reason that you are a farmer out in the western boundaries is generally because you want to be left alone. You like the isolation, you like the life, you like being separated, particularly from the city folk. And so Baldwin is not chopping, from his perspective, he's not chopping down trees on Governor Morris's property. He's chopping down trees where he's always chopped down trees. So who is right in this particular situation? Is it Governor Morris with this piece of paper, or is it Baldwin with his land use, right? Governor Morris doesn't live here. I live here. My family lives here. We're chopping down trees where we've always chopped down trees. We're going to continue to chop down trees. And if you're going to put us in jail, my friends, we're going to, we're not going to allow that to happen.
So was it ever really like their property or really just?
They just kind of live there, yeah. Because, yeah, I mean, when you are in one area, you want to move at this time, you want to move west, you kind of move out there, right? And then say somebody comes along and says, well, hey, that's actually our property. All right, move a little bit further west. But you have all these people in Western New Jersey that's just kind of doing their thing. They've been there for generations. This is where Samuel Baldwin had grown up with his family, and this is where they've always kind of farmed. This is where they've always chopped down trees. This is their life. This is their community, and it's being disrupted by these city folk like Governor Morris, who are coming along now and saying, "Hey, get off my property." Morris is saying, "It's not your property. I don't care if you have that piece of paper." I mean, it's actually a conception of private property closer to Native American. Native Americans didn't believe in property in terms of, I got this piece of paper which says that land is mine. Native Americans believed if I use the land, or if my tribe uses the land, we hunt on that land, it's our land. That's kind of, it's kind of a more traditional way of defining land use. If you live on the property, you farm on the property, it's your property. And so who's right in this particular regards? Well, it's really hard to specify who exactly is right in this situation, right? English property rights is who has the piece of paper, but traditional land rights, who's actually using the land. They're coming into conflict with each other. One of the reasons I'm pointing this out is because we imagine American Revolution where somebody named George Washington or Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson says something and everyone just kind of falls in line. That there's a uniformity to the spirit. Yop will hopefully really disabuse you of that situation. The American population were incredibly divided, even through the War for Independence, were incredibly divided over loyalty to England versus independence. But before this time, we need to understand that there were all kinds of fractures and fissures within colonial society itself, following along class lines. And one of the significant fault lines in the colonies was rural versus urban. Governor Morris's versus your Samuel Baldwin's. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to rural versus urban conflict when we talk about the U.S. Constitution down the road and the way that kind of class conflict informed the writing of the U.S. Constitution. But I wanted to introduce that as a way of saying, as early as the 1740s, there are growing conflicts among the colonists themselves that are going to help shape independence, to shape the decision for independence. Now, the form of class conflict that is going to play a larger role in shaping the decision for independence, right? That farm versus city folk thing is going to shape the decision to write up a new constitution. So put a pin in that. We'll get to that. The form of class conflict that's going to more directly impact the decision for independence is a conflict that's going on within cities themselves. We'll be focusing on Boston today, Philly next week. So what's going on in Boston in the 1740s and 1750s? Well, there's something wrong with Boston. So says the royal governor of Boston in 1747. There's something wrong, and this is what he says. The reason for the mobbish turn of this town, meaning Boston, the reason for the mobbish turn of this town is its constitution. Something wrong with the government of Boston, by which the government of Boston is laid upon the populace assembled in their town meetings, where the lowest inhabitants, by their constant attendance there, are generally the majority, and the gentlemen, the merchants, the substantial traders, and all the better part of the inhabitants. Royal governor because the King of England appointed this particular governor to be the governor over governor over Massachusetts in general, but obviously Boston being kind of the center of Massachusetts. He said there's something wrong, and what's wrong is the government of Boston, because Boston relies for its government upon this town meeting. Now, what is a town meeting? This is a political tradition dating all the way back to 1629 to the Puritans, who established Massachusetts, established New England. When Puritans came and they settled, the first thing they did was build a church. And that church functioned as the church, but also functioned as the meeting house for the town meeting. New Englanders would like to say that they invented democracy, that the town meeting was America's earliest democratic tradition. The problem with that is that you had to be a church member to actually have to actually be able to vote. To have a voice, like, it's true, anyone could come in, like Native Americans could come in to a town meeting and say something, but Native Americans couldn't vote. To vote between 1629 and 1691, to be able to vote in one of these town meetings, you had to be a member of the church. So really, this isn't a democracy. Really, these town meetings were a theocracy. But assuming that you were a Christian, you were a church member, then yeah, this is pretty democratic. You came in, and not only did you get to voice your opinion about whatever, we actually got to vote on all the things, anything affecting the daily life of your particular community. You had a vote, you had a say. If you're trying to get a visual representation of this, you really have to look at Stars Hollow and the town meetings there. Right, the Stars Hollow, the Gilmore Girls, when they get together with Luke and Taylor's overseeing the meeting, right? That's not some kind of peculiarity of Stars Hollow. That's a tradition in New England that runs all the way back to the Puritans in 1629. That Stars Hollow town meeting tradition of everyone getting together and everyone getting to vote over things like, should we be like killing deer or not? That's how New England cities set themselves up, and they still, I think, several New England cities still have. I think we forget what the number is now. I don't know how you can have 6,000 people on a town meeting, but I think up to about 6,000 or so, you can still have a town meeting form of government. The town meeting tradition is still there, right? The Stars Hollow form of government. If you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Stars Hollow, shame on you. Please, please, please don't do any homework this weekend. Just start binge watching the Gilmore Girls. You need to watch more TV. All right. Or even just, just go on YouTube and look up like Taylor Dorsey or Stars Hollow town meeting and just get like a visual representation of it. Okay. This is what the governor of Boston, 1747, is saying. This tradition, this democratic tradition of everyone being able to get together in Boston and kind of have a say and vote, this is what is wrong. But what is wrong is he's making particularly a class argument for what is wrong, right? It's not so much the government, it's the people who have the majority voice. Well, what does he call them? The lowest. I mean, I actually changed the language. He actually said meanest, but meanest didn't mean like brr. Meanest meant like lowest, the lowest inhabitants. What's he talking about? Dock workers, sailors, servants, all have to come out as Boston residents and participate in the town meeting, vote in the town meeting. And the governor is saying, this is wrong. These individuals should not be able to outvote what the governor considers to be the better inhabitants. Right? He's very explicit, the better inhabitants of Boston. The traders, the gentlemen, the people with education, the people with wealth, the people who are engaged in business, they should be running Boston. Through this town meeting structure, all the lower classes, because they're the majority, they outvote the better sorts. So it's a class critique that he's making of the town meeting. Something wrong with Boston. We need to change Boston because we can't have these lower classes running our city. Generally, when you push against a class, they push back. Interestingly, one of the individuals who will champion those lower inhabitants of Boston will be a member of Boston's privileged class, Sam Adams. You mean Sam Adams, like, is that, are you talking about like the beer guy? Yeah, I'm talking about the beer guy. Here's the interesting thing about Sam Adams. Sam Adams comes from the Adams family, one of the most important families in American history. Sam Adams comes from a wealthy family. Sam Adams was highly educated. He went to Harvard. He studied theology. He has a degree in theology. So how does Sam Adams end up on the side of beer bottles with this particular background? Here's the thing. Sam Adams, you familiar with the prodigal son story from the Bible? Son goes to the dad and say, "Hey, could you just like give me all my inheritance now?" If your kid ever asks you to do that, by the way, don't do that. It never ends well, right? There's never a story out there about, hey, I gave my son or daughter like all their wealth right up front, and they used the money really wisely, right? There's never a story of like the 18 or 19-year-old who used their money wisely. There's never a story. It's always a cautionary tale. Don't do this. So when Junior comes to you, just tell him, sorry, you're just going to have to wait till I die. Please don't kill me, but you're going to have to wait till I die. Okay? Because it ends bad. Sam goes to his dad, says, hey, can I have my inheritance now? Dad loves his son, gives it to him. Sam goes out and blows the money. Because that's what the kids do. They go out and they blow the money. Sam comes back, prodigal son story, right? Sam's welcome back into the family, but Sam, you're going to work for me now. Sam, the Harvard-educated theologian, becomes Sam the Malston. Sam becomes known as the guy who's running beer kegs around the streets of Boston for his dad. And by the way, this is why you should also not go to your wealthy parents and say, please give me the Porsche now, right? Because you might end up running, I don't know, maybe beer, maybe not. I don't know what your family is doing. Whatever is they're running around, yeah, you don't want to be the person doing that, all right? So Sam the Malster, he's running, but this also puts Sam on the street now, right? He's a man of the street. He's with these lower inhabitants of Boston. And he's hearing what the governor is saying about them, and he's like, this isn't right. These are good people. This is a venerated tradition, a town meeting tradition. This is something that Bostonians hold up with high regard. We're the greatest people in the world because we have this democratic institution. Sam goes back to Dad. Hey, Dad, could you give us some money? My friends and I, we want to start a press because we want to counter all these complaints coming over the royal governor. Dad gives him the money. And Sam's first foray into politics is his magazine, The Independent Examiner. Now, you'd be reading about Sam Adams in the Yacht book. You'll be reading about him as one of the earliest of the American Revolution. He will be the father of the Son of Liberty. We'll talk about the Sons of Liberty down the road. But Sam Adams is in many ways the first son of liberty. He's one of the first revolutionaries, one of the first individuals saying we need to break away from England. Before Sam Adams was Sam Adams, the son of liberty, he was Sam the Malster, Sam the editor of the Independent Examiner, Sam who was engaged in class warfare against the royal governor, Sam who was fighting to protect the reputations and protect the town meeting tradition against these aristocrats who were challenging them. And so through the 1750s, the 7 Years' War, Boston is engaged in this internal fight with the governor and the lieutenant governor complaining about the town meeting, complaining about the lower classes and the political power that they held. And Sam Adams and his friends, through the Independent Examiner, fighting back against that propaganda, imagining or advocating for a more democratic understanding of Republican. Things get pretty heated between 1760 and 1765 when Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson tries to shut down the town meeting, right? he and the royal governor, they're done with this verbal sparring. They actually, in the early 1760s, they tried to break up these meetings. They tried to stop the town meeting tradition. And then things really get nasty. I mean, the rhetoric coming out of this fight in Boston, you have one side saying, you guys are a bunch of wild beasts. You know, Hutchinson and complaining about Sam Adams and the lower classes of Boston. You guys are a bunch of wild beasts, and Sam Adams firing back. Yeah, Governor Hutchinson, you guys are a bunch of stinking skunks. I think politics is nasty today. I mean, North American politics have always been wild beasts, stinking skunks. Good times. Things come to a head in 1765 when nothing changes. The town meeting tradition continues. It's not shut down. New England, Boston, Massachusetts will continue to have a town meeting tradition, running all the way up. So the Gilmores have something to do on Friday night. But in 1765, Boston's 16,000 inhabitants are now bitterly divided, and they're bitterly divided along class lines because of this very classist fight over the town meeting tradition, whether to keep this or whether to shut it down. Boston is bitterly divided in 1765. Why should we care? What else is happening in 1765? Any Yelp readers pick up on some dates? 1765, this fight going on in Boston. Boston is bitterly divided along class lines. What else is going on in 1765? The Stamp Act. The Stamp Act crisis. Look, the way that we remember and the way that we tell the story of the American Revolution is that George Washington stood up and everybody followed him. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and everyone was like, yes. That is, as John Adams said, that is a lie. Particularly, it's a lie because the colonists were not united. They were deeply divided with each other all throughout this period, and they were divided oftentimes along class lines. So we need to understand that the American Revolution was not just one thing. The American Revolution was a dual revolution, as historians like Gary Nash put it. This is the best way to express the dual revolution. The dual revolution, or the American Revolution, was a struggle for home rule, for independence from England, but it was also a struggle for who would rule at home. It was a fight against monarchy for the principles of republicanism, but it was also a fight against aristocracy by the principles of republicanism. The American Revolution, there was a revolution, or what Nash calls the other American Revolution. There is a revolution within the revolution. There's this fight going on with England, but at the same time, the colonists themselves are dividing along class lines over, out of this crisis with England, what kind of society do we imagine? Do we imagine a society where a society of aristocracy, a society of deference, where the lower classes just assume that the upper classes should have political power and all the political representation? Or we imagine a more equal, a more open, a more democratic kind of society? The American Revolution is a dual revolution. These fights are going on at the same time. Rich and poor, working class, upper class are fighting with each other at the same time as we're trying to figure out what do we do about King George. As I said, we focus too much on King George pushing us around and not enough on the colonists pushing themselves around. Who exactly was the American Revolution? Against, directed against. Who's fighting who? Let's continue our story about Boston. We'll talk about this dual revolution in the context of Philly next week, but we'll focus and we'll continue more on the story of what's going on in Boston. Well, Boston in 1765, as I said, is deeply divided along class lines over this fight over the town meeting. This is the very year in which the Stamp Act is coming into effect. Some of you have already read about the taxes. You know that your Royal Proclamation upset the colonists, but then right after the Royal Proclamation, 1763, 1764, hey, England's going to start taxing sugar. You're taxing sugar? It would be like taxing Pepsi today. Don't tax my Pepsi, okay? You kind of already do, right? Well, the whole recycling thing is annoying, right? I pay an extra $1.20 for a pack of Pepsi, and the promise that I'm going to go and bring the cans back and stuff. Imagine though, right? I guess it's not a tax, right? It's just a way to ensure that I actually recycle those particular cans, which is good. I guess I should care about the environment. I shouldn't just be throwing Pepsi cans all around in the trash. So, all right. So they're not really taxing. But the thing is, I know, like when I buy a pack of Pepsi, I see that extra $1.20 charge there added on, right? And it annoys me because it's crazy right now. It's bought a pack of real sugar Pepsi. It's like $8 or $9 right now. I used to be able to get them for like $3 at like $8 or $9. Man, what's happening to the world when you can't get affordable real sugar Pepsi now? The best taxes are the ones that you don't know you're paying. Like the gas tax, one of the best taxes we have. So nobody knows you're paying it. Nobody knows how much you're paying. I mean, you probably hear that when you pump gas, that part of what you're paying a tax when you do so. But it's kind of embedded within. Nobody really looks at the receipt. You don't really know how much you're actually paying in tax. Politicians from time to time during economic hardship will say, maybe we should just like forego the gas tax. Gas prices are really high right now. Maybe we need a gas tax holiday. It'd be the worst thing possible. Because then everyone would realize, oh my word, I'm paying a tax when I pump gas. Right now, most Americans are blissfully ignorant that they're paying a tax when they tax gas. That's what makes the gas tax such a good tax. Because the government really needs that money for things like roads. Well, in other states, maybe not in Michigan. I don't, yeah. I mean, I don't know what's happening with Michigan roads.
They embezzle the fund.
What's that?
They just embezzle it.
Yeah. The Stamp Act is not an invisible tax, is it? It's a postage stamp. Now, there used to be this thing, ask your grandparents about them. They're called letters. So like when you had a significant other, somewhere far away, and like you couldn't call them on the phone, like you sat down with it was like paper. It was like this. Like this is paper. And you got a pen and you wrote words down on it. Yeah. You did that, and you put it in an envelope. And then you couldn't just like put it out there for a postman to take, right? You had to put this little stamp on it. Again, ask your parents about the stamp, right? Have any of you ever put a stamp on an envelope? Okay. All right, good. So there's still some of that technology still out there. Yeah. We kind of gotten over that particular tax, if you will, or we just said, all right, well, that helps pay for postman to take my letter to the significant other. I know you don't send letters to your significant others anymore. You text them. Right?
Birthday card.
What's that?
And a birthday card.
Yeah, there's probably an e-card, right?
Like the card?
You go to a store, you actually go and like spend time picking out a card.
Yeah.
Wow. That shows you care. That's more than I do. I have like an e-card service that I don't even look at the card. It's like, oh, it's a birthday card. Hey, Mom, happy birthday. What? It's awesome. Because I actually remember to send the card now, and I can send the card like the day before, whereas like, my mom's in Pennsylvania, so now I have to remember like 2 weeks in advance. And go to the store and like stand there like an idiot picking out a card, like who has time to do that? Why do we not all have e-card services? Well, all right, so maybe you're like, maybe you love your moms and dads more than me, and you give them nice birthday cards. But anyways, let's get back on track here. I'm a terrible person. That's what we take away from that side. The other point is this is a very visible tax. So following upon the sugar tax, the stamp act, the colonists all up and down the East Coast, they're just not having. And this is where this is most felt because after all, the stamps are coming in from England. The stamps are going to start at the ports. And so the Stamp Act crisis is really a port city crisis. So it's places like New York and Charleston and Philly. And it's Boston too, because that's where these stamps are going to start. They're going to start in the cities. They're not starting out with Sam Baldwin and his friends. This is going to be very much a city kind of tax. A very visible one. Remember the context that we talked about of the economic hardship. Here are people who are already kind of struggling for employment, for maintaining profitability. Now they're being asked to pay a tax on their sugar, and now they're being asked to pay a tax on their public documents, and they feel like this is completely unreasonable. So they began debating different forms of resistance. One of the forms of resistance will be most of the major port cities will experience a riot. Right? The Stamp Act crisis is a series of riots that happened in the summer of 1765. We might be reading in Yale about a Stamp Act Congress that was supposed to take place in October. It was a little bit late by that point. Several people took matters into their own hands. And one of the places that they took matters into their own hands was in Boston in August of 1765. So let me relate to you, if I can, or involve you if I can in this story. So imagine that you are living in Boston in 1765. It is August 14th. I used to say American Idol ended the night before, but I'm really dating myself there. So what, is there any TV shows you guys watch? With maybe The Bachelor? The Bachelor is over. Do you watch The Bachelor? You know what TV is? You know what cable channels are? Yeah, or I don't know, maybe the world's, no, it's August. So hockey's over, that's it. Yeah. The NHL is over now. The Stanley Cup is done, and so you're starved for entertainment. You're on your way to work on August 14th, and you look down the street near Boston. You look down the street, and you see that there's a crowd gathered on top of the hill just outside of the city. Again, you're kind of like, what am I going to do for fun now? Do I really want to go to work? No, you're going to go see what's up with the crowd. As you get closer, it looks like they're burning a person alive. Now, this is really cool. It's not every day. It's not every day, right? That Bostonians are burning someone alive. So now you're really quickening your pace to get up there. You get up to the hill, you get up to the crowd, and you realize that they are burning a man named Andrew Oliver. They're burning him in effigy. What does it mean to burn someone in effigy? If you go out tonight and burn Edwards in effigy, you're not actually burning me. What are you doing?
Burning what you stand for? Like symbolism?
Possibly. Probably some kind of likeness, right? Could be just a big, right? Effigy could take different, it could be like a stick. Maybe you put some work into it, and so it's more like a scarecrow kind of thing. I guess today you could do like an Edwards clone and then, I mean, literally burn me, right? We've gotten pretty sophisticated now, or maybe it's a Halloween costume, so maybe you have me dressed up like Ken or something. I don't know why Ken. I'm probably more Gollum, I think.
You play a good game.
What?
You play a good game.
I am not Ken. Yeah. What was that?
I got it. Could you say I'm not gonna like?
I eat, sleep, and dream Barbie. Anyways. So they're burning Andrew Oliver in effigy. It's like a big stick. It says, here hangs Andrew Oliver, the stamp man. Who's Andrew Oliver? Well, he's the guy who's been charged by the governor to hand out the stamps. And so the people, good people of Boston, and now you're one of them, you're not going to stand for this. You don't want to pay this particular tax. And so you join in the burning of Andrew Oliver in effigy. Thomas Hutchinson sent a sheriff out to try to break that up. It's like, nope, we're not done yet. So sheriff does not. You guys are not. You're not done. So you're hanging out there. You're burning Andrew Oliver in effigy, and it gets a little boring after a while. All right, what are we going to do next? Guy in the crowd named Ebenezer says, "Hey, I got an idea." And you work your way down to the docks to Andrew Oliver's office. In his office, he has all the stamps that are going to be distributed. This is where you're going to pay. Imagine like going to the post office and all the stamps that are there, a big room full of stamps. You go to Andrew Oliver's office, you destroy it, you burn it. You burned him in effigy, now you burn his office, you destroy all the stamps. Kind of hard to hand out stamps when all the stamps are destroyed. Well, that was pretty cool. I mean, that made for like an extra day or so. Are you done? No, Ebenezer and his friends said, "Hey, let's take it to the next level." So you go to Andrew Oliver's. This is around the 16%. You go to Andrew Oliver's house. You immediately go to the back. He's got a stable back there. And in that stable, he's got a carriage. We've talked about carriages here before. Got a carriage. You burn the barn, you burn the carriage. Then you go and you knock on the door. Excuse me, Mr. Oliver. We're the mob. We're here to trash your place. Could you please leave? Actually, Andrew, they found out that Oliver and his family had already taken off at this point. And so you and Ebenezer and your friends, you go in and you trash the place. You destroy the furniture, break everything up, burn some stuff, trash the place. Andrew Oliver resigns the next day. Message received. Now, the person who didn't get the memo was Lieutenant Governor Thomas Hutchinson. Yeah, remember the Thomas Hutchinson who was calling like Sam Adams and his friends like a bunch of stinking skunks? Yeah, Thomas Hutchinson is still there trying to manage the Stamp Act riots. So Hutchinson insists, hey, you destroyed these stamps, they're going to be paid, right? We're loyal to the king. We do what king says. We're going to figure out who conducted these riots. We're going to arrest them, right? I mean, Hutchinson is really laying down the law after August 16th. So you and Ebenezer and your friends, on the 28th of August, you go to Thomas Hutchinson's house. Thomas Hutchinson is sitting down at dinner with his family, and you knock on the door. "Excuse us, Lieutenant Governor Hutchinson, we are here to destroy your place. Would you and your family please leave?" And Thomas Hutchinson and his family leave, and you go in and you destroy the place. It's like Andrew Oliver, you trash your place. You take, Hutchinson had a significant amount of silver, about $250,000 worth in contemporary value. You take his silver. And then you throw ropes around the house and you start trying to take down the house. I'm not going to burn this one. It's probably stone anyways. But you throw ropes around it and you and your buddy start pulling. You're going to literally take his house apart. It's the morning of the 29th. You've been working all night trying to take down the house. You don't quite get there. You get maybe like a quarter of it taken down. It's really hard tearing down an 18th century house. They're not like houses today. Pretty easy to take down today. Not that. They were made really good. But so you get about half of it done, and then you're like, I think we've done enough. So now you go. Guess what? You're not going to be paying us again. Message gets back to Parliament. All right. Stamp Act. Yeah, we're not going to do it. They do send a message. Hey, the towns and duties, we're going to tax you guys down the road, but we're not going to enforce the stamp. message received. Most port cities had some kind of Stamp Act riot. You got to participate in the Boston one. A couple of things to note about the Boston Stamp Act riots. First, should this even be called a riot? From 1765 all the way up to 2023, we still use the term riot to describe certain things that happen in our society. What exactly constitutes a riot? Maybe yell fire in a theater where everyone's seeing Barbie and like maybe like everyone just like rushes out, like there's no like coordination or direction or no leader. There's no one at the door saying, hey, here's the exit, come over here. Where you're just orderly following people out. It's just a wild stampede. Probably fits the definition of a riot.
Destroying things. Sometimes.
Destroying things, so any destruction of property is a riot. Here's the thing, riot, that term riot is often used throughout history to describe things that you're trying to delegitimize. And you're suggesting riot a way when you call something a riot, you're suggesting that there was no rational or reasonable reason for this to happen. This is a riot, a spontaneous uprising. Well, based on what I told you about the Stamp Act riots, does this really fit some kind of uncoordinated, some kind of irrational, spontaneous uprising of the people of Boston? Or does it seem like, no, there was a particular focus, a particular message that was trying to be sent? And yes, there was destruction of property, but wasn't that destruction of property in service of a particular political message? We don't want to pay a Stamp Act. We don't believe this is legitimate exercise of parliamentary power over British citizens. Even the idea that this is somehow kind of uncoordinated. I mentioned Ebenezer McIntosh, who was a shoemaker. He was also the leader of a dock gang called the Loyal Nine. This is a guy who helped coordinate activities on Boston's streets and Boston's docks. And Ebenezer took a lead in the Stamp Act riots. And so this thing that is called a riot actually had leadership, direction, intent. Was it rightly called a riot? Or I mean, some historians have studied these things because actions like this, they date back to Europe, right? When there's a long tradition of civil disobedience or collective action when feeling that the government has somehow overstepped its bounds, trying to send some kind of message. Right, and the term riot has often been applied to them. One historian has suggested, or there's more than one historian has suggested, instead of riots, we should call them crowd actions. Because riot does carry this moral connotation with it, right? That this thing is completely illegitimate. Whereas crowd action suggests, no, this is a coordinated crowd activity, right? It had leadership, it had purpose, it had direction. I guess wasn't necessarily what everybody wanted. Even John Adams observing this. And John Adams was no friend of the Stamp Act, but nevertheless he noticed the Stamp Act riots. He called it an act of leveling. That term levelers dates back to the English Civil War of 100 years before that. The levelers were a group. The levelers were a group of political radicals who believed in leveling distinctions between rich and poor. One of the consequences of rethinking parliamentary authority versus monarchical authority is that we should do more to lessen the class divisions within our society. So that's where leveling comes from. It also comes from the fact that as Englishmen were starting to like put up like fences and hedges to say this is my property, not yours. The levelers came around and took those hedges down. They're trying to keep a tradition of like common property or commons in place at a time in which England, as part of its enclosure movement, was moving away from common land towards private property. So John Adams, when he called the Stamp Act rioters, people like Ebenezer McIntosh, levelers, he knew what he was doing. The leveling of the house, right? The trying to take down Thomas Hutchinson's house, that was a tradition of protest going all the way back to Europe, hundreds of years. Where one of the ways that you tried to send a message to ruling elites is you leveled their house, you took their house down. And it usually took a lot of people to do it. I forget, I saw a movie where this was happening once. A bunch of people threw ropes around the house, and you know, if you threw the rope in the right place, you had enough people pulling all at once, you could, you know, get a good yank and, you know, actually take somebody's house down. And that's kind of, so there is something to the Stamp Act riots going back to a long tradition of protest, one that upset John Adams, but one that Ebenezer McIntosh would say, no, this was not some kind of spontaneous uprising. This was us trying to send a particular kind of message. Second thing to note about the Stamp Act riots. Who were McIntosh and you and the other thousands who participated in the Boston Stamp Act, crowd actions, riots, whatever you want to call them in the papers? What were they upset about? Who are they trying to send a message to? We're just kind of established. They're trying to send a message. Who are they trying to send a message to? Are they trying to send a message to King, the Parliament? Hey, we don't want to pay your tax. This is illegitimate. This doesn't fit. A lot of historians just kind of stop there. But are there reasons to say they're trying to send another kind of message to another group of people? Now, ultimately, it would be nice to be able to go and look up Ebenezer McIntosh's Facebook. Right? I mean, a lot of the January 6th rioters, they went and said, hey, I'm going to Washington and this is what I'm intended to do. Hey, this is what I did on this day. And isn't it great? They posted pictures of themselves sitting behind Nancy Pelosi's desk and stuff. And then suddenly, like, law enforcement knocking on their door, like, what are you upset with me for? Like, well, laid out what you're doing. I wish that McIntosh had done that, but he didn't, right? There's no Facebook. I don't know if you knew that. There's no Facebook back. FaceTime took a very different form. And so we have to look at the crowd's actions. And when we look at the crowd's actions, they're frankly kind of ambiguous. I want to suggest, as Gary Nash does, that the actions of the crowd actually do suggest support the idea of a dual revolution. Obviously, the colonists are upset with Andrew Oliver because he's a stamp man. He's going to be handing out these stamps. And you're trying to send a message, you're trying to go right to the source, send a message, hey, we don't want to pay these stamps. This is an act of political protest, right? This is an act of, we want to maintain our independence from England. England cannot impose these kinds of taxes. And clearly, Andrew Oliver is targeted because he is a stamp man. So why destroy his carriage? Why trash his house? Isn't it enough? You burned him in effigy. You've destroyed his office, destroyed the stamps. Why go first after the carriage? Is it because he is a stamp man? Or is it because Andrew Oliver is one of these conspicuous consumers who traveled around the streets of Boston in a state-of-the-art carriage, flaunting his wealth over the Ebenezer McIntoshes of the city? And why trash his house? Because it's filled with all of the markers of wealth and privilege Why be upset with Andrew Oliver? Is it simply because he was a stamp man, or is it because he was a person of wealth? Who liked to flaunt his wealth? Not just any wealthy person who has a carriage. You're sending a particular message when you have a carriage. Why trash the carriage first? And then you go after Thomas Hutchinson. Why go after Thomas Hutchinson? Is it because Thomas Hutchinson is trying to still enforce the Stamp Act? And so it just naturally goes from Andrew Oliver next to Thomas Hutchinson. We're trying to send a message to Thomas Hutchinson. We're not going to pay the Stamp Act. Or is it because Thomas Hutchinson is the one who is out there saying things like, the poor in this city live too well? Is it because Thomas Hutchinson was the one who's trying to shut down the town meeting because it gave too much power to the lower inhabitants? Is it because Thomas Hutchinson calls you all a bunch of wild beasts? Why go and destroy his property? Destruction of property is, it can be a political message, but it could also be a personal message. They didn't just destroy his property. It took about $250,000 worth of silver. And then they tried to level his house. Why are they trying to level his house? To send a message, hey, we're not going to pay the tax? Or is it in the tradition of the levelers? We don't believe there should be these distinctions between wealth and privilege and poverty and work. Now, ultimately, I'll leave you to your own conclusions. But I would suggest that the actions of the crowd are, in the Stamp Act riot in Boston, are ambiguous. Why be upset with Andrew Oliver and Thomas Hutchinson? Is because they're the official crown, because they're crown officials, or because they're people of wealth? Ultimately, I don't know that we can decide. But if we just tell a story of the American Revolution in which we just cut out class division as though these things don't matter, and we just assume that, hey, Sam Adams said this, or John Adams said this, and George Washington said this, and everybody else followed, that doesn't seem to fit. That doesn't really seem to fit what we know about people, right? But this is kind of what we do. We look to golden ages. We look to romanticize the past. So we look for a time like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could all get back to the revolutionary period where everybody was all on the same page and we all had the same leaders and everybody knew what to do? And I'm sorry that this is when the historian comes along and says there is no golden age. There is no age in which the American people were all just like the American people and we all just got along and followed each other. This period of the imperial crisis is a time in which Americans are bitterly divided against England, but divided against each other. They're not just pushing back against King George, they're pushing each other. As some of them are imagining not just an end to monarchy, but an end to aristocracy as well, too. We'll see that next week when we look at the situation going on in Philly, the city of brotherly shove. Have a good weekend.